Hello. Hello, Rae.
Hi, Moze.
This is Moze Jacobs for DeBarra Spoken Word, which I co-organize with Paul McMahon and Nick Smith. DeBarra Spoken Word is a monthly session in DeBarra's, a pub, famous pub in Clonakilty, West Cork, Ireland. And we've gone online since the lockdown for COVID, and I'm doing loads of sessions, increasingly storytelling sessions. Spoken word to us means loads of things like poetry, prose, comedy, even a bit of singing, dancing, not dancing, theater sometimes. But storytelling seems to be where it's at the moment, maybe because stories are so important for us as people to make sense of what we're doing in this world. Our next storytelling session is on the 2nd of September, and then another one on the 18th of September. And with me is Rae McKinlay, and she is an experienced storyteller. And I've invited her to come here because I usually sort of write on screen or on paper, and I'm really interested to know what the secret is of good storytelling. So over to you, Rae. Can you tell us a little bit about where your stories come from, for example? Where you get your stories or where they get you?
My stories come from various sources. My last wolf story came from a workshop in Belfast. My lone willow story came from a memory I had when I was invited to go along to the Well of Memories. The river banding story came when I was just walking along Sweeney's Quay in Bandon, and I saw the river Bandon and the iron monster in the river dredging it. So in answer to your question, they come from many sources. In fact, I always like to say they whisper to me. Okay. Now, at this point, I just want to say that some storytellers may write their own stories like I would, but they would also use stories that's been stuck in time. And when I say the word stuck, I mean that in a good way. They've been written maybe like a legend years and years and years and years ago. And a storyteller might say, I like that story. I like the feel of that story. So they tell that story. So you don't necessarily have to write all your own stuff. I just do, because I just love writing stories and written words.
I should say, by the way, that Rae is not just a storyteller in words. She's done digital arts in the humanities and is doing comic art and moving videos even, and that's all connected to her storytelling practice. And she will have an exhibition that starts on the 12th of September in the Sheen House in Skibbereen with her visual art and words. Would you generally start with a visual when you think of a story? Does visuals come into your creation of story?
Well, I would like to say at the start, this is just me and my storytelling, and I never ever claim that I would be an expert. But to make it easier, what I'm going to do is probably critique one of my stories. Yeah. And the story I have chosen, because I'm in West Cork, would be the River Bandon. As I said, I was walking along Sweeney's Quay and I saw the iron monster. Now, the iron monster are the diggers. I just think it has a nice connotation when you turn the iron diggers into monsters. So what I did was I just stopped and I just let the scene whisper to me. I looked for the stories in the river. Now, when I tell a tale, I like to bring in all the senses. I like to bring in smell, taste, hearing. So I stood there and I just observed. Now, because I know the River Bandon, I know that there's a swan and I know that there's a heron. Neither bird was there that day. So to make it more straightforward to tell a tale, I chose one of the birds, and I chose the heron because the Celtic symbol, which I usually like bringing in the Celtic symbols of knowing, is that the heron sits patiently, waits. She sees while we forget. So what I did was then I went back home and I did get a piece of paper and I started drawing out just stick figures, the river, the monster, and the heron. And then I thought, where do I go here? I've got the bones, I need to bring on flesh. I'm very cautious when I write a story that a story should enchant. You should, well, I don't like using the word should. I think it's nice when you sow seeds. You just throw seeds out to allow people to ponder. And that's what I really love about storytelling. I love the way that a story enchants. And people can just listen and they can get what they want from that story. So with the River Bandon, I decided I would put myself in the story. So to create some atmosphere, I thought, what creates atmosphere? Because I like the listeners to feel as if they're in that place. So I thought, nighttime, yes. And what about Nutcracker Eve? Well, Nutcracker Eve is actually Halloween. I just love that term. You see, often when I tell a story, I do a story different from the written word. I will use phrases like tiredness is upon me. I think that goes better than I'm tired. But then again, it depends on the type of story. And when I do my soul stories, I like to think of them as soul stories. I like to use Nutcracker Eve. And I think it has a sort of description and a visual that can bring someone into the story. Well, I hope. I've not had rotten tomatoes thrown at me yet, but I have skinned my knees several occasions when I've told the story. In fact, I actually broke my foot last year when I was telling a story, but never mind. And that was the one about a leprechaun, so maybe I better to be very careful. So anyway, so where was I?
Beware nutcrackers.
Yes, so I thought River Bandon, the night before the veil is lowered. So I said, right, what will I do? So I remembered when I lived in Bandon, the journey from my house to McKinlay's Quay along to the river. So then I just started going into the story. Now, I never like starting with the weather or anything like that. I like to start bringing myself right into the incident. But I also like to include, as I said earlier, things like the moon. I think the moon comes in and gives a sort of special essence when you tell a story. Because I think at the end of the day, a person has their own lens and preconceptions of what they think. And each symbol might mean something different. But if you set a scene just like you paint the background in a canvas, you can kind of instantly get a sort of feel for where the story is going. There's no use telling a story about a nice day going for a picnic and painting that as a dark winter's Yuletide evening. So basically that is what I do with my stories. So I hope that clarifies something. And as I said, I'm not an expert. I am just navigating the story path myself. I am very blessed because I am learning from some great storytellers. And that's one thing I think we must do as a storyteller is listen. Listen and observe. Be conscious of your pacing. You don't have to go do, because rhythm is important. Short sentences to make it more climatic. Oh, I never realised I know more about storytelling than I thought.
Well, you say you're not an expert, and you know we can talk about that till the cows come home. But you do have a lot of experience by now in different environments to tell the story. I think the first step is the hardest, perhaps. Is it true? I get the impression that unlike what you can do with the written word, where you can fly all over the place and tell everything you want to do in a couple of sentences, that the story has to be like condensed to one specific incident or a series of incidents in a specific place with specific characters. Do you feel that that's true, or can you change quickly?
As I say, every storyteller can tell a different type of story. I'm not as good with anecdotes.
Anecdotes.
Yeah. Oh, can we clip this bit out?
No, we can't. There's no editing in this video.
Well, there we go, folks. I'm as human as anybody. This new digital telling stories when you have to look at the camera, because as a storyteller, I love to look at people's eyes when I tell the story, just connect with their faces. Yeah. But anyway, as I was saying, I can't really answer that because every storyteller would tell a different kind of story.
For you, I mean,
for me, yeah. For my preference, I prefer to keep one main character, a kind of not so good character, because you've got to introduce some conflict and bring in a character that's maybe apart from this, like the old woman with the silver grey hair, or the heron, or the dove, or something like that. And as I said, I like to bring in all the senses. I like to create taste, smell, make the reader, make the listener embrace the story, to try and get the listener to come in to the story.
And does emotion come into it as a kind of selection mechanism, like you were saying about the machine as a monster? And actually, when you said that, I remember looking not so long ago at machines working on the Clonakilty flood scheme, and sort of feeling that there were monsters that had invaded the town, making noise day and night. So I mean, and that gives a specific emotion. Is that what are you also looking for that?
Yes, I would actually put a lot of emotion into my stories. Well, I think I would put emotions into my story. For instance, the lone old willow is partly true. It tells the story of when I saw a tree being chopped down when I was young. So I do bring in emotion, even of the tree, the feeling of the tree being old, invisible, alone, feeling useless, being chopped down because it's not wanted, it serves no use anymore. And the tree in my story was the tree that I used to go to. It was a haven, it was like a den, and I used to escape there, and I just would love to sit under the branches and just look at the river. Mm-hmm. So even for me, the tree becomes a character. Okay. And I would put emotions into the tree, because I really like to write stories, especially stories of environment, of women's ways of knowing. I even write stories about the 70s and the 80s, that the spirit of the age when people from my generation had ideas, we were going to change the world and all that kind of stuff. And when I write those stories, I will bring the spirit of the age into the story and hope that the listener, especially if they're younger, will learn a bit of history about a generation of their parents or their grandparents. And yeah, I think story has a lot to do, in my case, with identity, because there's some stories I cannot write.
And because, I mean, is identity, is that a sense of place? Like you're from Glasgow, but you have other roots, you have Irish roots as well. So how do you position yourself? Because you live and work in Ireland at the moment. So do you feel that there's a shared heritage and that you sort of are
Yes,
inspired by?
well, I would class myself as Glasgow Irish, and there's many Glaswegians who would class themselves as Glasgow Irish.
Yeah.
Now, the strangest thing that happened to me was last January when someone from here asked me to do a Burns session.
What?
Now,
A Burns session.
Robert Burns, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, being Glasgow Irish, I really never tapped into the Burns. Not that I had anything to do with it. It was just a different culture. And now that's strange. There I was living in Scotland, and Robert Burns would be kind of very famous. His Auld Lang Syne gets sung all the time. And I never knew anything about Burns. And it was a lovely German man who was telling me all about his stories. So what I did was I went and reread Burns, because although I read a bit of Burns, but I never took it in. So I read Burns and I found out about his poems, and I thought, oh, I missed that. But you see, I kind of missed that because in some ways I was sort of like, I was more Glasgow Irish. I was going to the old storytelling sessions and the places where people would sing Irish songs and all that kind of stuff. And really, I kind of forgot about the Scottish side of me, which now I'm going to embrace.
So I think, I mean, I can't remember when I learned this, but I'm originally from Holland, as you can hear probably. And I never really realized that there were Irish people in Glasgow and that there was like a kind of, there's a divide basically between Irish and, you know, Catholic Irish and Protestant Scottish English. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And how is Burns, what is his role in all this? Robert Burns he wrote Auld Lang Syne? He wrote a what?
Yes, it was Burns that was the author of Auld Lang Syne.
Yeah.
A beautiful poem, really, with very deep meaning to a mouse. A poem about the environment that was written in the time of Burns. Well, as you say, there was a lot of Glaswegians who came from Donegal, Sligo, and parts of Northern Ireland in Glasgow. And Glasgow is a different city today. I grew up BC before cappuccino. Now it's kind of, you get your lattes and it's very cosmopolitan in many ways. Now there's still a way to go. But when I grew up, I am now in my 60s, there was definitely discrimination if you were Irish or you had Irish parents.
And your parents are both Irish?
No, there was one parent. My mother was Irish, but I still suffer from discrimination because I fitted in better with the Irish community. Yeah. And on saying that, it's not like we were all together in a big huddle in the one place, but we would go to the Irish clubs or to someone's house, and we would sing the songs and we would tell the stories. When I was growing up, I do remember there was a big factory with a big banner which said, "No Irish need apply." And there's a joke in Glasgow, it's probably dead now because I've been away a long time and generations change, that if you said, "I'm an atheist," someone would say, ah, but are you a Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist?
That's quite a good joke, I think.
Well,
So
yes.
you actually grew up with storytelling?
Actually,
Storytelling?
I did. It was in the background, but I have to admit, I thought I was too cool for all that kind of stuff. You know, I was a bit of a rebel without a clue, but for some reason it got stuck in the ears, you know, and then it went into the head. So yeah, but
And would those stories
my,
be about Ireland as well? Would they feature
well,
Irish people or landscapes?
yeah, well, I've got a story that I call The Bridge of Sorrow. It's an actual bridge that's in Donegal, and
Okay.
that's where many people from Donegal would go
Yeah.
and say goodbye to their kith and kin, and then travel on to Liverpool, Glasgow, or maybe the USA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I remember when I lived in Donegal, going over to that bridge, and I just stood there, and that's when the story whispered to me, kind of just does. And then the landscape, and I love to bring the landscape into my stories because there's a special type of landscape you have in Donegal. It's the wind has a different song than the wind in West Cork. The wind in West Cork is equally lovely, but it's just got a different song. And I know people look at me and go, what? But you see, I think in many ways we've become totally too rational and reason-based. Now, I'm not dissing that we have some reason and we have some rationality, but there's more to life than we can see with our own eyes. And in my stories, I like to bring that aspect in.
Okay, thank you very much, Rae. I think that is a really beautiful way to end this interview because it's supposed to be short and instructive, and I think it's very instructive and atmospheric. If you want to see Rae and other storytellers, go to the DeBarra spoken word, either the Facebook page or later the YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and like. It seems to be important. And that's on the 2nd of September at 8:30. That's Ancestral Tales Part 2. There will be an open mic for people who want to join us. It's going on Facebook Live and will then be put on YouTube. And on the 18th of September, we will be putting on YouTube a different storytelling sessions around the theme, how nature nourishes us. And that will feature people from all over the world. Increasingly, Zoom sessions feature people from all over the world, which is really great because you can get to know stories from all over the place. Rae will be part of both these sessions. Hope to see you there. Goodbye.
Bye.